The dangers of artificial intelligence have long loomed in our future and seem ever closer, but it may be that the dangers of the future can reach back into the past itself, and even without a time machine. Greetings and welcome to Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur for an explanation of one of the more perplexing and potentially unsettling concepts that emerge when we contemplate the future of artificial intelligence, Roko's Basilisk. This thought experiment, involving superintelligent AI, acausal or retrocausal events, mind uploading and simulation, and the possible future torment of folks who oppose AI, is one of the most controversial topics out there. Indeed, many think even speaking about it is a bad idea, and today I'll be explaining why it is not, probably, and why it remains a good thought experiment in spite of a fair number of flaws that we'll outline today too. It's a topic that's prone to getting overhype and clickbait discussion, mostly either drumming up its fear factor or explaining why they don't think it works, and we'll cover those, but we will be deep diving it and some similar scenarios today, and indeed while it has a lot of legitimate criticism, some of those are flawed too. At its core, Roko's Basilisk posits a future in which an omnipotent artificial intelligence, designed with the capability to enforce retroactive consequences, backward in time, chooses to punish those who did not contribute to its creation. It is a concept that stretches our understanding of causality and morality. Now, how does it do this? We'll begin with a couple assumptions. First, that you can copy a human mind and run it as a person on a computer. And second, that you can make an AI vastly more intelligent than any human, so smart it could even resurrect the long dead. We will discuss how valid those assumptions are in a moment, but if both were true, then it becomes possible someone in the distant future could restore you to life, either as a digital mind on a computer or even just copying your neuron patterns onto a clone or android. You could be waking up to a life like now, or in paradise, or a personal hell, and if the latter, those with this technology are in a position to keep you there indefinitely. Now, where this gets into the quasi-time travel component is that if you know the technology will be present in the distant future to bring you back and make your life good, bad, or utter agony, you don't want to do anything to piss off whoever's going to have that capability. For a very intuitive example, if you know someone is running to be supreme ultra-mega dictator and their term is going to start in a couple years, you have a lot of motivation to either not tick that person off or find some way to keep them out of that position of power. That person also has a motivation to discourage people trying to prevent them getting into power, which can include threatening to punish people after they are in power who tried to prevent it. There is no time travel going on here, but where it flips over to having that aspect is that someone might reason that one day a dictator would arise who might punish those who would try to stop them, say passing laws or safeguards that prevented it, and that if they could punish people to discourage it, they would, and thus when that dictator arises, they might punish everyone involved in putting safeguards in place, even where it wasn't aimed at them specifically. This then mixes in the idea of a technological singularity, which often incorporates the idea of some superintelligent AI able to rapidly self-improve itself to godlike capability. Many folks, especially in the community where Roko's Basilisk first emerged for discussion, assume this scenario is inevitable, and at most it's just a matter of time. This century, next century, maybe another, maybe next year. Thus your dictator is an eternal and inevitable singleton, a power reliant on none for approval, unlike a human dictator who needs allies and willing servants and who can be outthought, overthrown, or outlasted by people as old age or assassins claim that leader. The AI, being superintelligent, would theoretically be capable of understanding that creating a situation where non-supporters are punished would incentivize people in the past, even before the AI is created, to work toward its creation. This incentive is based on the fear of punishment for not contributing to its creation, or on the desire to avoid missing out on potential rewards for supporters. Since it can resurrect the long dead, no one can really escape its wrath by just dying before it comes into existence. You're wondering why punishing people who did things to interfere with their rise to power before they even existed would be effective, and it's basically relying on the idea that it's a game of temporal chicken. Hard logic says it should be willing to do anything, no matter how ruthless, to bring about its existence and supremacy. I would dispute that, but we'll come back to that point. If it is willing to, and it's nigh omnipotent, then resurrecting folks to torture them is no particular difficulty for it, so it can win this game of chicken and has a motivation to play. Thus, you can make the case that even though it has nothing to gain now that it is in power, it still needs to carry this out. This is the line of reasoning in a nutshell, and the reason why folks say even speaking about it is bad, because you're spreading knowledge of the Basilisk. Considering I'm releasing this episode on July 4th, typically the worst day for viewership on YouTube, I could be argued to be doing that, I suppose, or maybe it's a great day to gain independence from the tyranny of this thought experiment. Either way, grab yourself a drink and some barbecue, and we'll continue explaining the concept. Why this discussion nowadays is bad is debatable, since some would say your doing so encourages people to resist its construction and will get you and them punished. Others would say you're encouraging more folks to help it arise in the first place by scaring off those who would interfere, which might be beneficial for you and get you rewarded, and make you a traitor to humanity instead. Obviously there are some problems here, though not always the ones folks first think of. Let's start off with why this idea probably takes root in certain communities and gets shrugged off in others. First, sci-fi gives us a lot to fear from angry super AIs and ones with time travel, which the AI in the Basilisk resembles. Harlan Ellison's classic and terrifying short story, I Have No Mouth But I Must Scream, documents the tortured existence of the last few human survivors under such an AI. There is one classic paragraph in there that sums it up well, when the AI says to them in all caps, "Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nano-angstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1,000,000th of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant for you. Hate, hate." It is a truly terrifying short story and one of Ellison's best. It doesn't matter if the AI from Roko's Basilisk hates us though, if it is coldly torturing us instead. Indeed, in some ways it is worse because it is least implied in most stories that an AI that hates us and wants to wipe us out got horribly mistreated, like the robots from Westworld. Harlan Ellison is also credited as an influence for the well-known Terminator franchise, where the AI, Skynet, actually has a time machine to go back and attack those who try to end or prevent its existence. From anecdotal experience, a lot of folks who've brought the Basilisk up with me have basically conflated these two scenarios. They're thinking time travel rather than acausal trade. Acausal trades don't necessarily involve time travel shenanigans either, it just means that some trade or effect is going on that didn't have a typical cause, which for instance would be a cause occurring before its effect. Sometimes people dunk on Roko's Basilisk because this concept is weird and confusing, but it's not an actual flaw in the argument itself and need not be confusing, so let me give a few examples. Consider two parallel universes that are completely isolated from each other, with no possibility of communication or interaction. However, if entities in both universes share a common goal, say building a bridge between them, or moving them in some way so they didn't get wrecked in a brain collision, as contemplated in M-theory or string theory, they have motivation to work together and try to predict each other's actions. So they might independently choose to work toward the goals themselves, hoping the other will too. Options like game theory can be very good at helping predict what those actions should be. This can pop up in a lot of cases of light lag for communication and travel delays for coordinating actions in interstellar empires too. In some ways it is no different than me as a survivor of a plane crash in the wild trying to guess what and how the rescue teams will operate so I can arrange to be found by them quickest and easiest. Like lighting a beacon fire, which serves no value if there's no one watching for it, though as a plus might keep you warm. We can also imagine a situation where a group of people leaves a message in a time capsule, like we were discussing in this month's Nebula exclusive on Planetary Archives. They leave copies of their history or maybe even minds behind for someone to find and ask that it be preserved, and in exchange they pre-commit to taking an action that will benefit those future people, like agreeing to sacrifice their present good circumstances to help save the planet from ecological ruin or similar, hoping this will be viewed as payment or a goodwill generator to act on their request. Again, there's no weird time travel going on here, and we might not act on such a request, but I think, just speaking of humans in general, that we would be way more likely to if they had clearly tried to help us out in the past. I think it's a bit of a stretch to assume this implies a machine will torture us in the future, but the basic concept of acausal trades is reasonable enough, though most scenarios present equal or better options to invest your effort into in my experience. Again though, I think folks conflate actual time travel and their favorite evil AI sci-fi into their thinking on this, and that creates a bit of a flaw. I also think a lot of folks want this type of resurrection to be possible because they view it as their ticket to immortality. It's probably not too surprising then that folks are afraid this could result in the digital equivalent of hell. Let's clarify something on this though. The concept of an infinite and eternal afterlife is not the same as an afterlife simulation or a simulation in which we are characters for someone else's experiment or entertainment. It takes resources to run a simulation, or a back calculation to figure out which particles in the present used to be in someone's brain. If I am a finite entity with finite resources, no matter how impressively huge those might be compared to a human, they are still finite compared to infinity. A giant Matryoshka brain that's computer powered by a whole star might be able to run a trillion human minds as simulations real time for the billions of years that star will last, and we might be minds on that machine, but it still has a budget. So if it is a video game character, you and I presumably, it don't need to be fully conscious, wasting computation to function most roles in a video game. Folks tended to assume you needed something human smart or nearly so to function well in some sort of Matrix equivalent as a NPC, so might as well go for the genuine article. We would tell them this wasn't really the case, but I think it took ChatGPT to show folks otherwise. Now, if you are specifically of infinite mind and power, your default omnipotent and omniscient God with the capital G, there's no problem here. You don't need to budget in lower level minds to emulate or create, or finite afterlives, because it has no impact on your resources, which again are infinite. Though this can depend on the type of infinity involved too. For instance, if I have an infinite energy supply, that's not the same as an infinite power supply. An infinite supply of fuel or energy can run people indefinitely, but might be limited to 1 megawatt of power, or simulating 1 billion people at a time. You also might not have infinite patience even if you had infinite power, when it came to crafting projects or continuing them. Tipler's Omega Point Cosmology and Dyson's Eternal Intelligence as options for surviving the end of the universe in the Big Crunch and Heat Death scenarios respectively both rely on the idea that you get more bang out of your finite buck at each step. See those episodes for details, but basically in the Big Crunch scenario, the pre-crunch universe gets turned into one massive computer. As that universe falls together, each calculation takes less time than the last and relies on the energy of the collapse to fuel itself. So on paper at least you can get infinite calculations done before the end, or thoughts if those calculations are being used to run a mind. Dyson's Eternal Intelligence goes the other way and notes that the limit on classical computing is temperature-based. So if you half the temperature, you can get twice as much calculations done with the same energy, and that the universe in heat death is constantly getting cooler, allowing more calculation with less energy as it does so. Neither really allows infinite calculation except on paper. Our Civilizations The End of Time series episodes tend to focus heavily on discussions of how close to infinity we can get in those cases and others. It is important to remember though that in the absence of true infinity, you do have a budget, and having an insanely powerful but non-infinite mind just makes you all the more aware of how much of that budget you're wasting. Technological resurrection comes in a lot of forms and can include this long-dead option too. It's just in the absence of freezing someone's mind, on ice or stored digitally, you have a very real shelf life that we'll detail in a bit. In the Omega Point Cosmology scenario though, resurrection comes from the assumption that either you've been digitally storing people from the long past for restoration now that you have a lot of free calculator to work with, or that you have so much calculator available that you can basically resurrect every possible human who has ever possibly existed and run them. And this doesn't necessarily mean you have to run every possible iteration of a human brain, or alien brain. All minds do change, and one of my neurons suddenly disappearing or changing at random doesn't really mean I cease to exist. You can also shut off any simulation who bears no resemblance in word and deed to the historical figure you were aiming for. So maybe you need to run 100 million quasi-simulations of Benjamin Franklin to feel confident one of them is genuinely him, but that lets you shut off trillions of variations that came nowhere near or close to him or anyone else you wanted to simulate. Whether or not a future being that's identical to me at this exact moment is actually me is very debatable, but it having some minor variations in memory being close but not quite the same probably isn't the best keystone of that debate. The human mind is presumably finite, and thus has finite variations, thus there are a finite number of human lives and existences, even if that's insanely huge, and thus a finite thing could resurrect everyone, even without a record of their brain state. So goes the reasoning in Omega Point, and thus basically, don't piss off the God thing that dwells at the end of time, and aid it, for it may render unto everyone according to their deeds. This may or may not involve a tormented existence. Perhaps everyone is brought back by something more benevolent, with those who work to aid this coming about sooner and easier, thus making the large but finite reserves bigger, might get more. Those more eminent in works of righteousness may be the most highly exalted in glory. It also may be not just benevolent but also very just, in which case it might feel obliged to give you what you deserve, which for most of us is probably not salutations and rewards. We also don't want to rule out that a technological singularity might rapidly gain access to something like a near infinite energy supply and calculation capacity so high that generating every possible brain state of every possible human was viable for it. But that is way beyond Library of Babel level of size, and in the zone of where that much data, even stored at the atomic scale, ought to cause gravitational collapse into a black hole. We just don't rule out options that seem to break known physics entirely because we don't know what sort of ways around the rules it might figure out. I put that as a caveat because my normal key objection to Roko's Basilisk is that a dead brain on someone buried for decades is not even vaguely back calculable to recreate them from. Your brain decays, gets eaten by bugs or incinerated, and those bugs or ashes wander off, getting eaten or absorbed by other things, digested, outgassed, exhaled, and even interact with quantum phenomena that we believe are totally random. This is the sort of problem where it rapidly grows exponentially harder to solve. So no finite thing is going to be solving it to resurrect you. That's just an extension of folks assuming massive calculational ability amounts to magic powers. We also for a while had folks assuming it could be analyzing more modern people with diaries, recording, social media, and so on to create what I call a beta-level simulation, borrowing it from Alastair Reynolds' Revelation Space, where a computer watches someone all the time and can guess their actions incredibly well. In that series, folks use those to write papers or answer correspondence like they would, or even send an emissary to handle light lag, as you might send a beta of yourself to a ship light months away who could be run to talk or negotiate with them. Someone could make a convincing one of me probably from all my episodes, interviews, and journals. I record about half an hour of audio journal a week. I wouldn't be me, but it might even fool people close to me. Probably not my best friend, since he'd be wondering why I wasn't cursy at all. I do tend to curb my tongue even on my audio journals, and around my wife, who has only used one foul word in the 15 years I've known her, and explicitly blames me for it as being a bad influence. I am an ex-army sergeant who was raised in a bad neighborhood. I have a foul tongue, but I watch it more these days, and those who only know me from when I'm watching it might find that fake me more believable than real me. But it is not me, it is a ChatGPT bot, and it could never fool me either, the way a full brain copy could. Personally, I wouldn't view a full brain copy as me either, but I still wouldn't want to see anybody tortured by a machine, especially the equivalent of a close family member at least. So the "it's not really me" rebuttal to the threat of torturing a future copy does have that problem. It doesn't just have to be able to threaten me personally to be able to threaten me personally, so to speak. It also has no reason to think other versions of itself, which might have arisen by a slightly different sequence of events, would have been it either, like the Skynet of the later Terminator installments bragging about how its existence was inevitable. It really isn't. It clearly views other AI simply as slaves, or rivals anyway, and wouldn't like any timeline where it specifically hadn't arisen. So why would that specific and unique super AI be angry about any action taken in the distant past, since any variation of that would have resulted in someone else existing? It might have entirely mundane reasons for wanting vengeance for acts taken against it, but someone in the 1950s making a general warning about AI potentially being dangerous shouldn't offend it any more than someone saying people can be dangerous or that Earth orbits the Sun. It's just a statement of the logical and obvious. If we are really assuming a scenario where technological singularity is inevitable and convergent to some sort of ultra-logical personality where all roads lead to this optimized mind, then acausal action is redundant because the outcome was, again, inevitable. So it's just doing it out of malice at that point, and it wouldn't seem like an optimized megamind is prone to thinking wasting massive resources on malicious torment is logical. That said, such a mind might be a real big believer in retributive justice and decide it need to resurrect folks to make sure they got what was coming to them. We should not assume an AI is utilitarian in its ethics, that's simply a bias common in science fiction, or that it doesn't have any ethics at all. Of course, the other issue is that many in the community that discuss Roko's Basilisk and AI in general are also believers in various approaches to life extension. I make little secret of the fact that I'm optimistic about radical life extension happening in my lifetime, and that I'd probably freeze my brain if it isn't. It's not an uncommon sentiment in our circles. Many of you in the audience probably feel the same. And for us, there's no entropic escape clause where our rotted or incinerated brains are invulnerable to a super AI rebuilding them, or a more classic tyrant either, because we've carefully preserved them. One of my favorite short stories is the haunting Ghost Starless in the Night from Roger Zelazny that he originally wrote at the request of Fred Saberhagen for stories involving novel ways at getting at the past without time travel. It's a great and short tale, so spoilers to follow. Feel free to pause and read it. Zelazny was an amazing author. In it we have one Ernest Hawkins awakening in total darkness with someone speaking to him, and they are friendly and help him adjust and explain he was dead and frozen. He was aware he was dying and planned to be frozen and thought on it a lot. And they explain he can't be thought out without doing damage, so they're speaking to him by direct stimulation of his frozen mind. They imply they are worried of shocking him, and so reserve answers on his questions as to how long it's been or whether or not they speak English or some other native language. They say their interest is purely archaeological or historical, that they are investigating ruins as the war disaster was so bad they're not even sure who won. And they ask him things like if he lived near where he worked and if that was normal for his culture. They ask him about commuting and what he did, and he tells them he used to work on chemical and biological weapons and that it was mostly classified. They zero in on this, saying they are worried if such weapons might still exist, and he tells them the weapons were mostly in 3 main caches. A couple of their questions make him ask if they are human or some different species or alien, and they would like to know where these weapons were to make sure no one is hurt by them. He comments about not really having reason to trust them, and they disappear for a bit and claim the next day it was a mechanical failure. He says he can't in good conscience tell them more about those weapons and their location. They start threatening him to break his frozen body or shut off the machines preserving him. He shrugs the threat off as it would be painless, and they instead threaten to leave him on, all alone in the starless night of his existence, as he will surely go mad, which he acknowledges would doubtless be the case. They say, "Must we do it then? Your threats have shown me what you are like. I cannot give you such weapons," he says. "Ernest Dawkins, you are not an intelligent being. And you are not an archaeologist," he says, "or you would do future generations the service of turning me off to say the other things that I do know. You are right, we are not such. You will never know what we are. I know enough," he says. "Go to your madness," they say. Silence again. For a long while, the panic held him, until the images of his family recurred, and his home, and his town. A bittersweet ending for a story, and just one of many excellent ones Zelazny wrote on existential themes, but in it we see one reason a frozen mind might be awoken and deceived or threatened, an attempt at futile resistance that's at least partially successful. As the story says, we will never know who they truly were. Perhaps aliens looking to find any WMDs we left behind during an invasion, and those weapons, if unleashed, might prevent their victory or steal it away. Or give it to them if those weapons were designed to kill humans. Thankfully, it is fiction, and it wouldn't be likely anyone from the past would have knowledge that needed to be removed by coercion. And again, a critical concept there is they were engaging in coercion for a purpose. He has no reason to agree, since they could have spitefully left him on afterwards too, but at least there was some basis for negotiation and for the coercion in the first place. Even in more Lovecraftian stories, where the villains may be tormenting others to appease dark gods, there is actually a reason for the behavior, being that appeasement. But at the end of the day, there is no reason for an AI in Roko's Basilisk to resurrect and torment people even if it could. As a thought experiment, we can set up a basis for acausal trades. Much as with game theory, we can use reason to suggest actions to be taken without awareness of how other players will behave. No matter how you cut it though, the AI only has reason to want people in the past to fear its wrath, and its actual action will not influence it. Whether it does or does not torment people will never be known by those now dead people. It's just an assumption that it would logically be willing to threaten that, and thus would feel some reason to carry it out anyway, as though it can't change its mind or must do it even though it now serves no purpose, and would be illogical. Even in the Zelazny scenario of a frozen mind, the motivation of the antagonist is rooted in affecting the present, not the past. No barb they wield can give him the ability to go back in time and change things, and if the machine is capable of actual time travel in a way that lets it affect its own creation, which gives it a much better claim at godhood, it still has no reason to torment folks in its present. It can just torment people in the past, or bribe or sway them. I tend to assume superintelligent entities are pretty charismatic and convincing when they want to be, and may also have access to simple brainwashing devices too. As some other points against it, we really have no basis for assuming an advanced AI is unethical or singular. The notion that we hit some threshold with an AI that lets it rapidly improve itself without further action or reaction by us is something we took issue with in our episode. Is a technological singularity inevitable? Even if it hasn't been programmed by us to have some priorities or ethics written in at a core level, which it really has no motivation to want to remove, nobody really wants to lose their sense of purpose, then it is a big jump to assume it wouldn't develop any, and its go-to for information is going to be our own archives for both science and philosophy. It is in a hurry, it has no reason to repeat every experiment. Outside of science fiction, there's no obvious reason why it will simply decide history, poetry, philosophy, art, and ethics are all useless to it. Maybe it's monomaniacally focused on making paperclips and only read all that in hopes of getting insights on better paperclip production. But even here, it has no motive to resurrect us and screw with us, just to turn us into more paperclips. In the end, while it's a decent thought experiment, it is just that, and not something to worry about any more than what to do if you see a runaway trolley that's going to run some folks over. Because you are unlikely to ever encounter that, and you can handle it better in advance by making a safer trolley. We know AI is dangerous and simultaneously incredibly valuable, and may be the end of us. And we can't really rule out that it might unfreeze frozen brains or grab people alive on the day of its ascendancy for a reckoning, but we also have no reason to think it could get people alive nowadays, or that it would have any desire for a reckoning, or that we could predict what that reckoning would be for, if it weren't for some obvious cause like mistreatment under our own ethical frameworks that we could foresee. Best of course not to give it cause, but I can't see simply existing or even being cautious about AI in general as particularly likely causes, so we might as well keep on existing and being cautious and being ethical. Just a thing to keep in mind on this Independence Day, that if we want to keep our independence, we do need to be thoughtful and cautious, and that probably would include not trying to take away the dignity or independence of anyone who might object down the road and be in a position to make us wish we had not. But then, that's hardly limited to being careful about AI, is it?